Welcome to the debate. Imagine drafting a Heisman Trophy winning, undefeated national champion quarterback at number 1 overall. You bring him into the building, and then you intentionally treat him like a third string practice squad player.
Yeah, which is completely wild.
Right. For most franchises, that would sound like institutional malpractice. But that is exactly what the 2026 Las Vegas Raiders are doing right now.
And, it immediately raises red flags. I mean, when you look at the sheer amount of pressure resting on this specific roster, especially after a pretty dismal 3-win season last year, you really have to ask what's actually going on beneath the surface.
We're looking at a team navigating incredibly high-stakes positional battles, right? They're placing massive expectations on just a few veteran additions and making a highly scrutinized franchise-defining decision to sideline their premier rookie asset.
Which brings us right into the central question for today's discussion, drawn directly from recent analysis of the Raiders' 2026 training camp pressure points. And that question is, does this current roster construction, with its intentionally high-pressure positional environments, indicate a stable foundation that is genuinely ready for immediate contention, or
does all of this veteran maneuvering just mask a highly volatile, deeply developmental team that actually requires extreme patience?
Exactly. And just to lay our cards on the table early on, I represent the view that the Raiders have established a legitimate win-now foundation, utilizing veterans and leveraging high-stakes pressure to demand a significant immediate leap.
And, I represent the view that the team's underlying instability, which is so evidenced by their handling of the rookie quarterback and reliance on completely unproven commodities, absolutely necessitates a long-term developmental lens.
All right, so let me just jump right into my perspective here. I look at this camp and I see a legitimate, intentionally designed win-now foundation. They are utilizing key veterans and strategically leveraging high-stakes pressure to demand a huge leap from their core. The coaching staff has instituted a very clear mandate.
A mandate they might not be able to back up, but go on.
Well, we see this with Kirk Cousins, right? He's outperforming the competition in spring practices. Earning the starting job in this complex offensive infrastructure isn't just a default setting for a veteran. It proves the team is built to compete today. And then look at the calculated pressure placed on offensive lineman Jackson Powers-Johnson, who is now paired with an elite center in Tyler Linderbaum to protect Ashton Jeanty.
Right.
Or edge rusher Malcolm Kuntz playing on a prove-it one-year deal opposite Max Crosby. I mean, this is the hallmark of a competitive roster with uncompromising standards. It is not a rebuilding one. It's like a nearly finished puzzle, They are only a few specific profiles away from being completely well-rounded.
I'm sorry, but I just come at it from a completely different way. You see calculated pressure, I see a house of cards that's about to collapse. Let's start right there with the handling of Fernando Mendoza. I mean, this is the number 1 overall pick. He was drafted to be the savior of the franchise. Yet head coach Clint Kubiak and the staff are seriously considering redshirting him behind not just Kirk Cousins, but Aiden O'Connell.
Which is a smart move.
Is it? Reporter Q Myers likened this to the Jared Goff route, where the rookie spends his entire first year in a baseball cap just holding a clipboard. To me, that doesn't scream we are ready to win. That screams our offensive infrastructure is simply too weak to support a rookie without ruining him. Expecting a significant leap is just a dangerous misdiagnosis of a really fragile roster.
But wait, why does starting a rookie immediately have to be the sole metric for evaluating whether a roster is stable? I mean, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on this whole quarterback strategy.
Go ahead.
Starting Kirk Cousins over the number 1 overall pick is not a sign of organizational weakness. It is the ultimate luxury. According to the camp reports we're looking at, Mendoza has been exactly as advertised. He's absorbing the playbook, he's, asking constant questions, and he's genuinely earning the room's respect.
But if he's absorbing it so well, why is he QB3? I mean, why isn't he even QB2?
Because the mechanics of Clint Kubiak's system are incredibly demanding on a quarterback's eyes and feet. It relies heavily on under center, wide zone play action. When you turn your back to the defense to fake the handoff, you have a fraction of a second to whip your head around.
Right. To locate the linebackers.
Exactly.
Well, no, think about it. It was born out of absolute necessity for a Rams team that had a historically terrible offensive infrastructure under Jeff Fisher at the time. If the Raiders roster was genuinely ready to compete right now, a dynamic, fast-learning Heisman winner with an undefeated pedigree would be actively pushing for the QB1 role.
Even if the veteran is executing flawlessly?
Yes, because generational talent forces its way onto the field if the ecosystem can actually support it. When you stash a dynamic talent like Mendoza completely out of the line of fire behind Aiden O'Connell, it sends a blaring signal. The organization is terrified.
Terrified of what, exactly?
They are looking at an offensive line with major structural question marks, and a wide receiver room that, as analysts have rightly noted, desperately needs a James Jett-type vertical playmaker to stretch the field.
Okay, the speed factor.
Exactly. Without that pure speed forcing safeties deep, the intermediate middle of the field is going to be incredibly congested. They are deciding it's just too dangerous to put their prized rookie into that compressed, chaotic environment. That is self-preservation, man. It's not a luxury.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are equating patience with fear. And I think that's a mistake. Isn't protecting a young asset the absolute ultimate sign of organizational maturity?
Not if you're pretending you're a Super Bowl contender.
Think about what happens if you throw Mendoza into the fire early and he struggles. The moment you bench a highly touted rookie, you risk fracturing his confidence permanently. By keeping him inactive, they are making a calculated, strategic choice. If Cousins gets hurt, putting O'Connell in ensures the offensive operation continues without derailing Mendoza's developmental timeline. They are ensuring that when he finally does take the reins, the foundation beneath him is unshakable.
But see, that entire premise assumes the foundation can ever become unshakable with the current personnel in the trenches. And I think that's where your argument really hits a wall. Let's look at the supposed stability on the offensive line. You mentioned Jackson Powers-Johnson earlier, framing his situation as some kind of high-standard competitive environment.
It is. He's being asked to step up.
He is facing his third completely different coaching staff in 3 years.
Well, yeah.
We need to talk about what that actually does to a young lineman structurally. When you change offensive line coaches that frequently, you aren't just learning a new playbook. You are constantly unlearning and relearning fundamental mechanics.
Sure, there's an adjustment period.
It's more than an adjustment. One coach wants you to step with your inside foot on a reach block. The next wants a flat step. The next changes your hand placement entirely. That kind of systemic whiplash destroys a player's anchor and timing. You don't forge a reliable starter through constant schematic chaos.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. What you are identifying as schematic volatility is actually, in this specific iteration of the roster, a culture of extreme accountability. Let's use a mechanical analogy here. Think of an offensive line in a zone scheme like a suspension bridge.
Okay.
If one of your support cables is weak, it puts exponential, catastrophic stress on the main pillars. Jackson Powers-Johnson has indeed run out of runway, but that is precisely because they finally brought in a pillar to support him.
You talking about Tyler Linderbaum?
Exactly. By placing an elite, technically refined center like Linderbaum right next to him, the coaching staff has intentionally removed the variables. Linderbaum has the sheer functional strength and leverage to handle elite nose tackles one-on-one in the A-gap.
He's good, I'll give you that.
Because of that mechanism, Powers-Johnson is no longer forced to double-team inside to save his center. He is free to pull, climb to the second level, and execute in space to open lanes for Ashton Johnsey. It is a make-or-break pressure test. The front office is essentially saying, we gave you the elite anchor, now execute your assignment.
A suspension bridge only holds if the materials are sound, regardless of how good the central pillar is. And this precarious make-or-break mentality extends right over to the defensive trench, which, honestly, might be even more volatile. They are relying almost entirely on Malcolm Kuntz to be the sole relief valve for Max Crosby on the edge.
And they signed Kuntz to back-to-back one-year prove-it deals to extract maximum effort. It's the exact same accountability principle.
But forcing a player to sink or swim only works if the player isn't carrying a 50-pound weight of previous injuries. Look at his chart. Kuntz has an extensive injury history. He hasn't shown elite, consistent pass rushing form in years. The Raiders are heavily dependent on him miraculously staying healthy and returning to a peak performance level we haven't seen consistently.
He's shown flashes.
Flashes aren't enough when you're the main guy opposite Crosby. And worse, They are asking him to do this without a dominant interior presence.
Ah, you're referring to the analysis regarding the lack of a Tommy Kelly-type player on the inside.
Exactly. Analysts are hypothetically wishing for a 6'6", 310-pound nose tackle like former Raider Tommy Kelly, for a very specific mechanical reason. When you have a true zero shade or three technique defensive tackle with that kind of sheer gravity, it structurally forces the opposing offensive line to commit a double team inside.
Right, to protect the A and B gaps.
Yes, and when that happens, the center and guard are occupied, meaning the offensive tackle on the edge has to handle the edge rusher one-on-one. Without a Tommy Kelly-esque anchor to collapse the pocket from the inside, opposing offensive lines will simply slide their protection toward Max Crosby, leaving Coons on an island, or worse, facing tight end chips and double teams himself. If Koontz's injury history catches up to him under that physical load, the entire pass rush collapses.
I have to admit, I am genuinely confused by this overarching panic regarding the defensive line's interior. Yes, a team always wants a dominant, gap-eating nose tackle. Everyone wants a Tommy Kelly, but modern NFL defenses manufacture interior pressure through stunts, twists, and simulated pressures constantly.
Simulated pressures don't hold up for 4 quarters against elite lines.
But defensive coordinator Patrick Graham isn't just going to line them up in a static front and hope for the best. He is going to scheme favorable matchups for Koontz.
Scheming pressure takes time. It requires linebackers to rush or defensive linemen to loop around each other. Stunts take a fraction of a second longer to develop than a pure one-on-one edge win. And if the pass rush takes even half a second longer to get home, your secondary has to cover for that much longer. Which brings us to the most glaring example of a roster in deep transition, the defensive backfield.
I had a feeling you were going to say the secondary is a house of cards as well.
It is the definition of a fragile ecosystem. The defense is gambling almost entirely on unproven commodities. They were relying on Darian Porter, a second-year player who recently had to convert to cornerback to lock down the heavily targeted CB2 spot.
He has incredible upside.
Upside is great for a rebuild. But he has to do this opposite an unspectacular low-ceiling CB1 in Eric Stokes. When a team is leaning on a converted second-year player in a premium, highly exposed position like boundary corner, you are looking at a developmental timeline that is vastly longer than a win-now mandate allows.
But again, look at the mechanism of how that CB2 battle is actually playing out in camp. Porter is not being handed the starting job by default. He is earning it through an absolute crucible of competition. During spring practices, he has been actively swapping first-team reps with rookie Hezekiah Masses, and they have Marion Richardson and Jermod McCoy pushing violently from behind on the depth chart.
Swapping reps between 4 unproven players doesn't mean you are forging a diamond. It usually means you simply don't have a starting caliber cornerback on the roster, and you're just throwing bodies at the wall hoping one sticks.
I completely disagree. Iron sharpens iron. The athletic tools are undeniably there for Porter. I mean, he has the length, the hip fluidity, and the straight line speed to be a premier perimeter defender. By forcing him to rotate against different receiver profiles every single day, the competition itself is elevating the floor of the entire defensive backfield. They are intentionally stressing these young corners now so they don't break in September.
That's a compelling argument on paper, but have you considered the mathematical reality of modern NFL passing attacks? A secondary cannot survive on athletic potential and hip fluidity alone. They need diagnostic speed.
When motion happens pre-snap or when receivers execute complex switch releases at the line of scrimmage, a corner needs the experience to instantly diagnose the route combination. Porter doesn't have that yet because he's a converted player. And worse, they don't have the veteran safety net behind him. The analysis correctly pointed out they are missing an Eddie Anderson-type player.
The historical veteran ball hawk.
Right. And it's not just about generating highlight reel turnovers. A safety like Eddie Anderson plays the deep post and reads the quarterback's intentions. He operates as the eraser. If a young corner like Porter bites on a double move, a veteran post safety recognizes it, drives on the ball, and breaks up the pass, effectively hiding the young corner's mistake.
Sure, a safety net is nice.
It's essential. Without that veteran eraser at safety, Porter is relying entirely on pure athletic recovery. And against NFL-caliber route runners, recovery speed fails. If you are missing an Eddie Anderson to quarterback the secondary, and you are missing a Tommy Kelly to collapse the pocket and force hurried throws, opposing coordinators are going to diagnose Porter's inexperience pre-snap and exploit it mercilessly.
It is a high-wire act. There is absolutely no denying that. But I would argue that every single team attempting to rise from a 3-win basement to playoff contention has to walk that exact wire. The difference here is the structural intentionality of the entire team. They haven't just thrown young bodies out there in isolation. You have to look at how the offense protects the defense.
By running the ball?
By controlling the variables. If a young corner like Porter gives up a long completion, Kirk Cousins in the veteran-led offense have the capability to sustain a meticulous 12-play drive. They control the time of possession, they rest the defense, and they dictate the pace of the game. And, this goes right back to Mendoza.
How so?
By keeping the rookie quarterback on the sideline, the offense drastically reduces the catastrophic, unforced errors, the misread coverages and strip sacks that put a developing defense in terrible short field situations. The entire ecosystem is designed to protect its weakest links while applying immense focused pressure on the players who are physically capable of making a leap, like Powers Johnson and Kuntz.
And that brings us right back to our core philosophical divide. You see an intentionally designed symbiotic ecosystem. I see a structure where every single load-bearing wall is perfectly dependent on the others not failing.
Well, football is the ultimate team sport.
Yes. But if the entire strategy relies on Kirk Cousins playing flawless, turnover-free football just to protect an unproven secondary, and on Malcolm Kuntz having a career year despite a lack of interior defensive line support, then the foundation is inherently volatile. The moment one of those variables shifts, say Cousins has a multi-interception game, or Powers Johnson gets overwhelmed by a stunt he hasn't seen before, the pressure immediately cascades down onto players like Porter who just aren't equipped to handle it yet.
That's a worst-case scenario.
It's a very realistic scenario, and when the defense starts giving up 30 points a game, the temptation for this coaching staff to pull the ripcord and throw Fernando Mendoza into the fire to save their jobs will be overwhelming. At that point, the patient, methodical, developmental timeline you praised completely disintegrates.
Which will be the ultimate test of the coaching staff's resolve. If we look at where we've landed today, my stance remains that the 2026 Raiders have intentionally constructed a high-pressure, veteran-led environment. They possess a foundation capable of erasing the memory of last year, provided that key role players step up, absorb the tactical advantages of players like Linderbaum, and meet the intense expectations laid out for them.
And my perspective remains that the structural realities of this roster, the necessary, cautious redshirting of their #1 overall pick to protect him from a suspect line, combined with a heavy reliance on converted, rotating, or frequently injured players in premium positions, point undeniably to a long-term rebuild. It is a roster that requires absolute intellectual honesty from the front office regarding their timeline and extreme patience from everyone else.
I think where we absolutely converge today is on the reality of the margins. The Raiders' margin for error in 2026 is razor thin. We can both agree that the ultimate trajectory of this entire season hinges on whether players like Jackson Powers Johnson on the interior, Darian Porter on the perimeter, and Malcolm Kuntz on the edge sink or swim under this incredibly intense spotlight.
Completely agreed. Athletic talent is only one part of the equation. The context in which that talent is deployed, the schematic support they receive, the veterans placed next to them, and the systemic pressure placed upon them will ultimately dictate the outcome. It's an incredibly delicate balance between protecting the future franchise quarterback and demanding real results in the present.
It really highlights the value of looking past a team's basic depth chart to truly understand the complex mechanical pressures placed upon specific position groups. There's so much more to explore regarding how these battles shake out. I highly encourage our listeners to dive deeper into the source material to track how these specific training camp dynamics evolve, particularly that right side of the offensive line and the cornerback rotation, over the coming weeks.
Because once the regular season begins, theoretical arguments and camp hype give way to empirical evidence. The film won't lie.
Exactly. It's like testing a physical structure. We can spend the entire offseason looking at the blueprints, analyzing the schematic intent,
and debating the strength of the materials used in the trenches and the secondary. But the external scaffolding of training camp is about to come down. Very soon, we are all going to see just how much weight this foundation can actually bear.